राधे राधे। राधे 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 राधे। राधे 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 राधे। राधे 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 राधे। राधे कृष्णा कृष्णा राधे कृष्णा कृष्णा राधे कृष्णा कृष्णा राधे राधे राधे। राधे कृष्णा कृष्णा राधे कृष्णा कृष्णा राधे कृष्णा कृष्णा राधे कृष्णा कृष्णा। राधे 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 कृष्णा कृष्णा राधे कृष्णा कृष्णा राधे कृष्णा
Allow your eyes to close gently from top to bottom. Allow the awareness to shift from the outer world to your inner world. Don't judge. Don't analyze. Simply witness for a moment the world within yourself, right here and right now. Allow the awareness to merge with your breath. As it flows in and flows out. Draw all your awareness and consciousness into the breath. Become one with your breath. Now gently bring the awareness of your breath, rather than in your chest or lungs as usual. Instead of that, bring the awareness to a place that is just below your belly button, about 2 inches below the navel. It's called the Swadhisthana chakra. This energy center that sits at the core of the self, just below the navel, above the groin. Bring the awareness to the breath there. Can you feel that area expand on the inhalations and release on the exhalations? From the next inhalation, instead of expanding the breath outwards, you're going to be aware of it rising in the body. So rather than the abdomen expanding like a balloon, instead beginning in that same spot of the Swadhisthana chakra, carry the breath upwards. So allow the awareness to merge with the breath as it flows up through your being. Feel it flow through your solar plexus, through your rib cage and lungs, up through the throat, and ultimately to your third eye center, just between the two eyebrows. And from there, let it go back, exhaling down. And if you can't bring it up all the way to your third eye, don't worry. Don't force it, don't strain. Just carry it as high as you naturally, easily can. And then release downwards. Sinking back with each exhalation. Back down into the core of the self, the core of the being. Higher and higher, rising on the breath with each inhalation. Opening the energy centers of the body as we rise with the breath. And sinking deeper and deeper with each exhalation into the core of the being. Into the light. Into the expansive stillness. Into the peace. As you inhale, allow yourself to carry in this sacred energy, this divine energy, this energy of awakening and enlightenment, the energy that flows across the heights of the Himalayas, that flows off the waters of the sacred Ganga. Take it in and allow it to rise within you. Gently bring the palms of the hands together at chest level in Namaste. And rub the palms of your hands gently against each other. Place your palms over your closed eyes. Gently open the eyes into the palms of the hands and lower the hands. Welcome to satsang, everyone. I'll begin as usual with a question that's come in advance, and then we'll open it up to any questions that anyone here may have. Satsang literally means in the presence of truth. And so it's the time in which we delve together into the truth. Not the truth that is only true at this moment in this place, right? So we have what we call our lowercase t truth, which is the truth that says it's 7th of September, it's 7:25 in the evening, we're in Rishikesh, India. So that's true, but it's true only for a moment. In 60 seconds it'll be 7:26. Tomorrow it'll be the 8th of September. Many of you maybe won't be here tomorrow, so you won't be in Rishikesh, India. But it's also not even true at this moment for people anywhere else in the world. Pick up the phone and call your friends in London or California or New York or Sydney. It's not 7:25 in the evening. For some of them, it's not even the 7th of September. For some, it's already the 8th of September. It's past midnight. And so that's what we call lowercase t truth. It's true, but it's true just in this very specific intersection of time and space. The truth that we talk about in satsang is the truth that's pervasive, eternal. That's the capital T truth. And it's the truth that applies to people from any religion, any culture, any age, any socioeconomic status. I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what package your life has come in. The truth is higher than that. It transcends all packages. So that's what we do here. And I'll take a question that we've gotten in advance, and then we'll open it up. I am new to the path of yoga. What book or texts would you suggest I read? I come from an academic background, and reading things and then taking exams on them and giving them back was something that came very, very easily to me. Especially if the exam was, the next day and you didn't actually have to retain it for very long, just the 24-hour cramming into the brain and give it back the next day. It was easy. And when I first came to India now 22 years ago, next week actually, and I knew that I was meant to be here, my initial instinct was, I'm going to read everything there is to know about India and Hinduism and spirituality, and I'll read it all. And I actually stopped myself Because what I realized was that if all God had intended for me was to master this the way that I had mastered academia, there was no reason to be in India. I could have stayed back in California. I mean, there's fantastic institutes of Eastern philosophy, Eastern studies, Eastern spirituality, all over the world, but Northern California, where I was, happens to be a hub for a lot of that. And I knew that wasn't why I was sent here. And so I took a very personal vow for the first several months that I was here, that I wasn't going to let myself do that was too easy. To convince myself that somehow, because I had read a lot of books and memorized a lot of facts and figures and history and names of things, that I somehow knew something. It was so apparent to me that I knew nothing when I got here, that being here, being in this place, being in Pujya Swamiji's presence just wiped out for me any concept that I had of I know something. And that emptiness, I realized, was so precious actually, that I needed to not do what came easily by filling it with just somebody else's knowledge, somebody else's words, somebody else's experiences, that I needed to really sit with that emptiness and allow the same divine experience that had touched me so deeply when I first came, to allow experience to fill me. And I share this story because, of course, the question was not, what books have you read? The question was, what books should I, the questioner, read? And what I have found is that while books are wonderful, and I'll suggest some, it's really important, if what we're looking for is actually to grow and expand in ourselves, rather than to just become the quickest, fastest teacher of others that we can be, the book that we really need to read is our own self. You know, Pujya Swamiji, my guru, makes a very sweet joke. He's got an incredible ability with words and phrases, and he says, you know, it's fine to go on Facebook, no problem, but at the end of the day, remember to face your book. And that book, facing that book, reading that book, is actually the one that gives you much, much more. And with regard to yoga, well, the actual word yoga means union. That's what yoga is union. Now, most of us, when we study asanas, we assume that the union is just a union of, you know, eventually my hands will touch the ground. That union will come. Eventually I will get my head down to my knee. That union will come. But ultimately that's not really the highest, deepest union that we're looking for. We move deeper. My breath to my body. My mind to my muscles. My body, my mind, my spirit. And then ultimately, this sum total of self to the divine self. This drop to the ocean from which I have come. And that union is ultimately the union of what yoga is supposed to be. The union of the self to the divine. And that's not going to come necessarily from reading a book. There is a whole path of what we call Gyan Yoga. In the Bhagavad Gita, known really as a scripture on yoga, 700 verses 18 chapters, scripture of yoga. And interestingly, nowhere is there a mention of bent legs, straight legs, twisting, turning, extension, you're upside down, you're right side up, you're sideways. And I mention that because the asanas are fantastic. I have a very precious asana practice. They're wonderful. Our body is a temple. We only have one. We have to take care of it. But what yoga can give us is more than that. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna speaks about 3 different main paths, right? The path of bhakti, the path of jnana, wisdom, bhakti is devotion, the path of karma or action. And even in the jnana yoga path, the path of wisdom, it's about wisdom that comes from within. At no point in the book does Lord Krishna say to Arjuna, I want you to go home and read this and read that and read this and come back, next week and there's going to be an exam. In all the chapters on Jnana Yoga, there's no book recommendations. Now again, books are wonderful. But I mention this as someone who, on a very personal level, had to overcome my urge to trade the opportunity for my own wisdom in exchange for someone else's wisdom. Because that's never what's going to change us. What reading the books do is inspire us. Okay. That's possible. Great. They'll give us new ways of thinking about ourselves. Oh yeah, I am like that. You'll read something in a book and you think, oh my God, did they, have they been videoing my life? Yeah, I do that. Yeah, I feel like that. And it's wonderful because it pulls us out of that sense of my darkness, my problems. I'm somehow unique in my struggles. Makes us realize, oh yeah, wait. Thousands of years ago, people had the same problem. Not quite so unique. And here's the way out. So the books are wonderful to explain a path. It's like a map. But ultimately you have to walk it. Now there are books, not exactly what the questioner asked of books of yoga, but when we take the meaning bigger, there are books, again on a personal level, that I have found that instead of telling you about wisdom, actually put you in the presence of the master. There are a few books that have been written by, about enlightened masters, in which, for me, reading them has actually been such an experience that you feel like you are sitting with the master. So the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, for me, was one of those books where it's written by his disciple who just described what it was like to live with Sri Ramakrishna and the things he would say, and it's about this thick. And I would find myself reading, and then my eyes would open. And I had no recollection of when I had put the book down, when I had closed my eyes, when I had folded my legs, when I had sat in meditation. The path from reading about him to being in such a profound presence that I could do nothing but meditate was so smooth and seamless. So there are some books like that. In terms of books on yoga, I don't want to take our whole satsang time tonight, so I'll just give kind of on different ends of the spectrum. The Bhagavad Gita, absolutely. You can't get a wrong translation. Or I have yet to hear of a bad translation. There are some, of course, that are much more devotional focused. There are some that are much more gyan focused. There are some that are short, some that are long. But I'd say literally just whatever touches you. Any bookstore is going to sell at least half a dozen different options. Just kind of close your eyes and feel what speaks to you. If you're interested in any aspect of yoga, you need to read the Bhagavad Gita. So read that. If you're interested in a yoga of how to use the physical body as a medium, how to use the asanas as a medium, I would read anything by B.K.S. Iyengar. Whether what you're looking for is perfection in the postures, perfection in the pranayama, whatever it is, an understanding of the 8 limbs of yoga. There's so much. There's really so much. And again, what matters most is not what we read, but how we take it in. And so one book will lead you to another. Another thing will lead you to another. Keep yourself open. Walk by bookstores and feel what pulls you. Not because it's flashy, not because it promises, instant enlightenment. But what pulls you? Read that. Then read something else. But remember in the meantime to keep reading yourself. It's not about how fast you can get through them. It's about how deeply you can internalize it. How much can you take it in? If Gyan Yoga is more of your path, I would read anything from the Swami Chinmayanand lineage, Swami Chinmayananda, Swami Dayanandji Maharaj. I mean, it's a lineage of Gyan yogis, wisdom, Vedanta, in a brilliant way. The Bhakti path, I mean, there's so many, I don't even know where to begin. But that's probably enough to start with for now. And then really just keep your heart open. Ask other people, what are they reading? How are they finding it? Are they being touched? How is it impacting them? And remember that all of these people who have experienced all of it and have written, in order for their books to touch you, it's only because they've had the experience. Anybody who writes a book based on other books that they've read is not a book that's going to touch you very deeply. And so for your life, sure, take the roadmap, take the inspiration, absolutely. But then remember that ultimately the book that matters most in your life is your book. And so then go in and read that. Before taking any of the other questions in advance, I'm happy to open it up to anyone here who has any questions. If there are any. Okay, I'm going to take another that's come in advance. You'll have one more opportunity after this one. How do we avoid people taking advantage of the goodness in us, the good that we do for them? A lot of times the concept of being taken advantage of, first of all, it's something very, very new, culturally. If you go back over spiritual literature, you're not going to find issues of people feeling like they're being taken advantage of. This is actually a very recent concept. And it's come with this concept of the idea that my highest good, my greatest good in life is going to come by what I do for myself. And so taking advantage of me is basically you're making me do too much for you. You are not doing enough for me. Or you're not leaving me enough time to do things for me. Those are the ways that we feel taken advantage of. Either this relationship is a one-way street, I do everything, you do nothing. Or you're so demanding that there's no time left for me to do things for myself. Traditionally, in the spiritual philosophy, the opportunity to do for others is actually the path to our highest good. The idea that my highest good is going to be served by what I do for me is a really new concept spiritually. For us to realize that doing good for someone else is going to lead to them somehow squeezing me for more is a fear that stems out of several things. It stems, number one, out of this myth of scarcity. That somehow there's not enough goodness. That somehow if I give you too much goodness, there's not going to be enough left for me. Or scarcity of time. If I spend my time doing good things for you, there's not going to be enough time or energy for me to do good things for me. And this is this myth of scarcity. There is no shortage of goodness, obviously. Yeah, we do only have 24 hours in a day, that is for sure. We do only have a certain amount of physical energy to do before we need to sleep again or eat again or sit down again. But here's where things get really, really interesting and fun is if I can change my concept of what I need. They did a really interesting study recently, just within the last few months it came out, of looking at longevity, health and longevity in people around the world. What is it that leads to health and longevity? And of course there have been so many studies on this, but this particular one looked at one very interesting aspect, which had to do with what people's lives were dedicated to. And what they found were that people who were the ones who took what we would call very good care of themselves. And so they were people who had disposable income and they made sure to take lots of, rest and holidays and, get themselves pampered and, do the things that we would say, oh, you need to do this to stay healthy. Were people on one hand. People on the other hand were people who didn't do very much of that, but whose lives were dedicated to a cause or a mission. People who had something that pulled them out of bed every day, that even though they may have worked much longer hours than people in the first group, may not have taken the vacations or the weekends that people in the first group took. Interestingly, they actually were healthier and lived longer. And what this study, and I forget where it was done, but it was some very prestigious institute. I mean, it was a university research center of great distinction. And what they concluded was that having something that we were committed to, having a reason to get out of bed every day, actually made for greater health and longevity than all of the vacations, all of the massages, all of the, weekends and whatnot. And for me, what I found so interesting about this is really what the spiritual tradition tells us, is serve, 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 give, give, give. When we talk about karma yoga, the yoga of action, it's how can what I do be yoga, be my spiritual path. So it's not, oh, here I am over there doing for you, and then I need this time and this energy to do my spiritual practice. But how can what I do be the path and be the destination? Not about the goal, not about the end result, not about the fruits, but the act of doing. How can that be the path? And that's when it gets really interesting. And so what I would say on the idea of people taking advantage of our goodness is, if someone takes advantage of you, that's their karma. That's their karmic package. We have vocal cords out of which no can come just as easily as yes. I mean, it's not like somehow saying yes is easier on the lips and the tongue and the vocal cord. If we're saying yes to things that we don't want to do, and that as we're doing them, we are resenting the person we're doing it for, or we're doing it grudgingly, no one benefits. No one. Not even the person you're doing it for. Because what you're doing in a state of grudging is never good work anyway. It's never good service anyway. It's always sort of bare minimum, cutting corners. Your brain is half there, half not there. So you're not even giving something good to the person who you think you're doing something for. And you're definitely not doing anything for your own spiritual path. If instead you can figure out inside, and it may vary week by week, month by month, year by year, what you're going to say yes to, what you're going to say no to, and then the things that you've said yes to, do them fully. Fully, 200%. Not counting hours until the end of the day, not counting days till the end of the week. But do them as a spiritual practice. And of course, in that case, only say yes to the things that you can really do. I mean, we do need to sleep, we do need to eat, we do need to bathe. Some of us have families we need to tend to. I mean, when you're deciding what you're going to say yes to, because a lot of times, a lot of us say yes out of the fear of not being loved, not being liked. I have to keep saying yes, otherwise they're not going to like me, they're going to be mad at me. Which also comes out of this myth of scarcity. That there's somehow a finite amount of appreciation and love in the world, and I have to grab it from wherever I can, even from this person who's making me do things I don't want to do. Because I'm so afraid that if I say no, that I'm going to lose my chance for love and appreciation. So we have to be really clear. How many things can I say yes to that I can give my fullness to? And what you'll find actually is that or I have found in any case, is that you actually can say yes to a lot more things than you think you can. Because when you give your fullness to them, A, they're a lot more enjoyable, so you get a lot less tired. You're much less drained at the end of the day. The drained at the end of the day comes because you've spent the last 8 hours looking at your watch or looking at the clock or wondering how long till your coffee break, wondering, when is it going to be 5 o'clock? And that's tiring. And you've lost the opportunity to get in the flow. You've lost the opportunity to be part of literally the flow of the universe. You're stagnant. And that's tiring. And so if you give your fullness to things, A, it's much more enjoyable, much less tiring, and you actually accomplish a lot more. And so if you make a commitment that whatever you've said yes to, you're going to give your fullness to it. You're not going to wish you weren't doing it. You're not going to be, messaging with your best friend, I can't believe I'm still doing this, oh my God, just another couple hours, whatever it is. You're not going to be on social media every hour, but you're going to give your fullness to it. It's a spiritual practice because you've said yes. No one held your hand to fire and made you say yes. You've said yes consciously. Live up to that. Have integrity. Have sincerity. Do it. But also have the courage to say no to things that you can't do. That's the only way you're going to fully be able to do what you've said yes to. And be able to say no with the awareness that there's no finite amount, no shortage of love and appreciation and friendship in the world. And if someone is going to pull it out of you because you haven't done what they want, because you haven't let them take advantage of you, well, maybe that wasn't necessarily the right relationship in the first place. Or maybe the relationship needed a catalyst for change. And maybe you learning to say no was the crucial catalyst for change. And if that other person is also on a spiritual path, they'll shift. Maybe they'll learn to say no in their lives. Maybe they're taking advantage of you because somebody took advantage of them. This is how patterns work. So learn to say no. And learn to be yes. Let that yes be who you are. And then whatever you're doing will be for you. And if you have to readjust a month later, a year later, readjust. Give yourself that freedom. Readjust. And then see. So we have time for one more quick question. Yes. How do you stop the initial thought of judgment against the self? Okay. The way that patterns work is the more we engage in the pattern, the stronger we make it. In science, we call it neural networks. In Indian spirituality, we call it sanskaras, impressions. And a good way to think about it is Say if I take this piece of paper and I hold it like this, and I take my glass of water and I pour it over the paper. Actually, let's say it was not something that would disintegrate with the water, something hard, a rock, a stone, piece of wood. I pour the water over it. Well, the water is going to flow pretty evenly down the surface of it. But if I take my fingernail, or I take a key, or I take a knife, or I take something and I constantly rub it in one place, I'm going to create a groove. And then when I take the water and pour it over it, the water is going to flow mostly into that groove. And as the water flows in that groove, what happens? It gets deeper. And the deeper it gets, the next time I pour the water, where's the water going to go? The groove. The more water that goes, the deeper it gets. So it becomes this cycle. More water goes, the deeper the groove, the more likely it is the water is going to go. Call it a neural network, call it a sanskara, either way. This is what happens in our lives. So every time someone is late to a meeting with me or late to doing anything for me, I have a total meltdown. Okay? Not really, it's a hypothetical situation, but it's a total meltdown. I hope I don't, right? I don't do that. Okay, so total meltdown. And every time I have a total meltdown, literally, the patterns in my brain, the neurons in my brain, learn, reaction to lateness, meltdown. I scream, I yell, I have a temper tantrum. That is my reaction to lateness, okay? Every time I have a temper tantrum, I'm strengthening that pattern. And here's what's interesting about it. And we'll come to judgment in a moment, but here's what's interesting about that. In the West, in psychology, there used to be, it's actually slowly changing as we learn more about actually how the brain works. There used to be this great emphasis on you've got to let it out. You've got to let it out. Whatever you feel, just let it out. You're angry, punch things, pillows and punching bags and, whatnot. What we now know is the more you respond to a situation with anger, the more likely you are to respond to situations with anger. Rather than anger being like, something bad that you ate that's given you food poisoning and you just have to get it up and then you feel much better. Rather than it being like that, it's actually a pattern. And it's a pattern that strengthens the more we do it. Similarly with judgment, similarly with criticism, similarly with negativity. I mean, any habit of how our mind works. And yeah, we could psychoanalyze why that happens, but in this case, it really doesn't much matter. What matters is we have habits. Some of us have habits to judge, others have habits to criticize, others have habits to get angry, whatever it may be. The more you do it, the more you strengthen it. And so, yes, it can happen that the thought doesn't arise. But in order to do that, you have to break the pattern. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Typically, the best way is you start a new groove. The more you start a new groove, the deeper that gets. And there's a while in which I pour water down and maybe you've got a 50-50 chance it's going to go here, it's going to go there. But the more I emphasize this groove, the deeper it's going to get. And then more and more water is going to come here, it's going to get deeper and deeper. And slowly, because in this example, whatever we're holding here, we'll call it something alive. rather than, not something alive, it's gonna grow back. The way that valleys grow back after rivers stop running through them for a while. Right? This is how our planet grows. A river runs through somewhere long enough, a glacier comes through an area, you get a valley. Go long enough with nothing running through it, it's going to start to fill in. Luckily, in our brain, it doesn't take millions of years. The brain actually changes really, really, really quickly. So what I would suggest is starting with simple and easy things. Literally, things like put a rubber band on your wrist. Every time you find yourself judging, in that moment, snap the rubber band. Simple, easy, and effective. What it does is, it teaches the brain judgment, pain. It's creating a new pattern. The new pattern is judgment, pain, judgment, pain, judgment, pain. It used to be judgment, pleasure, judgment, pleasure, judgment, pleasure, because there's something about judging others that on some very deep level makes us feel a little better about ourselves. It's the same reason that people gossip negatively about other people. People who talk badly about others in generally are people who don't feel very good about themselves. People whose friendships and relationships are based on gossiping about others are relationships that are very, very shallow. What they have in common is having fun talking badly about other people. That's not a relationship. But instead of actually going deep, instead of actually deeply connecting and being open and vulnerable with each other, I'm going to use this as a way to kind of pretend that we have a relationship. It gives us that level of pleasure. It gives us a sense of connecting to other people. Now, granted, it's not a deep connection, but nonetheless, it's something. It gives us a sense of feeling good about myself. If I can feel better than others. But that's shallow. That's not the highest that we want. It's not what we want our friendships or our relationships to be. It's not what we want our own awareness of the self to be. I'm better than that person. What kind of self-esteem is that? We're not here on earth in a competition with anything other than our own egos. Who's going to run the show today? That's the only competition that matters. Is who's going to run the show today? And so, yeah, use things that get the rubber band. Every time you judge, snap it. Pain, pain. And slowly what you're going to find is the minute that you're about to have a judgment, actually the mind is like, ooh, like you literally start to cringe before you even judge. We become like Pavlov's dogs. We're salivating at the sound of a bell. The body learns very, very quickly. About to have a judgment, and the body, and that's great. Because now what's happened is you've become aware of it before it happens. And that's ultimately the goal. Is how can I bring awareness to something that's about to happen before it does? And that cringing of the body away from the rubber band snap is your cue. I must be starting to judge. And that's when you stop and you change. And what you're going to substitute that with is up to you. It could be anything ranging from a simple mantra. Just instead of a judgment, chant your mantra. Or it could be something more specific with regard to that. If I was about to judge a person, something positive. So if something negative was about to come up, force myself to think something positive. Change my habit. So I'm already paying attention to that person or that situation. But now I'm going to force it to be something positive instead of something negative. And the same is true for the self. So either way works. Either just substitute it with a mantra that's just going to take you within and out of that pattern, or give yourself a different pattern. Positive, positive, positive. Of course, of course. And one last piece of that, one last option. When you're thinking the positive about someone, the second phase, because I have no idea when I get to see you again, second phase beyond that is me, me, me. Meaning that being I'm judging, whether I'm judging them negatively or positively, is me. I can only judge if I feel separate from you. And so the first and easiest step is simply to substitute something positive. But ultimately the highest step is, can I see me in you? So wherever I'm going to start judging, me, me, me. And that becomes the new pattern. Wherever you go, whatever you see, me, me. And that's ultimately yoga. Wonderful. Are you here tomorrow? You're here tomorrow. Fantastic. We will start with your question tomorrow. Okay. Wonderful. Have a beautiful rest of your evening, everyone. And we'll see you all tomorrow.